Hey, crew, and welcome back to Trenches. I'm your host, Milan Terez. On this show, we have unfiltered conversations with entrepreneurs in the messy middle. We dig into the experiments, defining decisions, disasters, pivots, and breakthroughs that shaped their companies long before the world was watching. Before we get into it, if you like this episode, which I know you will, please take a moment and like, subscribe, and share this episode to your group chat. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Trenches, the podcast. Today, we are meeting with Sarah Dalley, the founder of Bonding Over Books, a conversation game that helps book clubs get to know themselves and each other better, all while keeping the book at the center of the discussion. After almost a decade working in marketing for mission-driven startups in New York City, she moved back home to Michigan and found herself in one of the loneliest seasons of her life. After a cold DM from a childhood friend, she joined a book club that would change everything. Now her brand is carried nationwide at Barnes & Noble and Paper Source, helping readers everywhere find their people too. Hi, Sarah. Welcome to Trenches, the podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited to chat with you today. Bonding Over Books is such an amazing brand, and I cannot wait to learn more about you, more about how it started, and to share your journey with the crew. So, for our first question, our signature question, what trench are you in right now?
Yeah, so currently we are trying to grow our brand awareness. As you mentioned, Bonding Over Books was founded just a couple of years ago, and we have already landed on the shelves of retailers nationwide, small independent bookstores, and then your larger bookstores such as Barnes & Noble and also Paper Source stores. But we're still have only, a little above 2,000 followers on social media. And so really trying to get our brand awareness up, especially amongst the reading community.
Oh my gosh. And I know book talk is one of the biggest things ever. I love dipping my toe in. I've been getting into reading a lot more over the past year to combat the doom scrolling and the brain rot. So I am so excited that your product is out there and will help new readers like me dive into books a little bit better. So let's dive in more into Bonding Over Books. What did your life look like before starting Bonding Over Books?
So yeah, before I started Bonding Over Books, I was living in New York City. I was there for about 8 years. I was working in PR communications, moved over into marketing. I found myself working for startups. I've always really loved to build and be part of stuff from the ground up. And so I think that was just my first taste of stepping into entrepreneurship. It just wasn't the right time until just a couple of years ago when the idea came to me, and it felt really organic and natural, and something that I felt I was at the right place with the right people, opportunities, and resources around me to really step into that phase that I'm in now.
That's amazing. It's great to hear you talk about timing as well, but also always having this entrepreneurial drive within you, or this little spark that we like to say. And that being a part of your life, take me back to the time when you decided to move from New York City to Michigan. And what did that time feel like for you? And how did you navigate that?
Yeah, it was really challenging. I made the move in 2022. So it was right when, COVID was starting to lift and things were starting to get better. But the 2 years before that, I was between New York and Michigan, going back and forth. I was living alone in New York at the time. And I met my now fiance at one of the times I was in Michigan. And so we started having a more serious relationship, and it made sense for me to move back to Michigan just because of what was going on in the city with COVID, and also paying for rent by myself. And of course, just this relationship is going to go anywhere. We might as well start testing those waters a bit more seriously. But it was really challenging. I think, unfortunately, when I left, it was starting to get better in the city. And so it was almost like, oh my God, now everyone's going out to dinner again, and it's starting to feel more lively, and the city that I fell in love with in the beginning, and now I'm leaving it.
Mm-hmm.
So So that was a very hard thing for me to do. I think it was a bit of that tug of war of like knowing that, maybe timing is right to like step into this like new phase of life, but at the same time, like grieving your past and the place and just, all of those memories, I think it was a really hard thing for me to do. And I didn't realize it at the time until I was like actually going through it. And then landing back in Michigan, I grew up here. So I don't know anyone who's listening who has returned home. It is also a really wild experience mentally. I think you just have flashbacks of all of these memories that you had from childhood and high school. And I almost felt like, I worked so hard to get to a city and build that career. And now I'm back at square one. Or it felt like that. It really felt like I was like, wait, why did I just erase everything? And now I'm back here again. And that wasn't the case, obviously. Landed back here and then have been able to blossom in my own way. But at the time, it was just so challenging and meeting new people. I was so used to, being in a city where you're talking to strangers on a daily basis. And I live in the suburbs of Detroit. And so as much as people are so lovely here and we have that Midwestern charm, it's still different. You don't really walk into a coffee shop and just pick up a conversation with your barista like you do in the city, or I haven't felt that. So I try to bring as much of that to here and try to like mold that for myself. But yeah, I was definitely lonely, going through a lot of just understanding what that change looks like and what my future holds and really wanting to build community here. I think the community aspect is most important. I'm sure we'll get into that more, but it was not an easy transition. That is what I will summarize it with.
I completely understand that. Anybody who knows me personally knows that I have moved states almost every year for the past 4 years.
Oh my God.
And I think I'm about to do it again. It is insane. And so going through that process of dreaming about a new life, getting there, having the adjustment period, figuring out your own bearings, and then finding community, it's a long cycle. It takes so much longer than you expect it to, especially when you're in the hopes that the next place is going to be the right place. But then again, you look at your social feed and you look at the friends that you did make or the communities that you always wanted to join. And when you're no longer there, you're like, wait a second. I never did that. Is it going to get better when I'm not there? Like there's so much conversation that happens in your brain during those transition periods, but you just have to stay steadfast in knowing I made the best decision for where I was at that time.
Okay.
And there is going to be some purpose to why I'm in this next place. So I feel you. I feel
Yeah.
you, girl.
Well, very and truly, it hit on everything that I was trying to convey. And I wish you luck in this next. That's crazy that you've done it so many times. I couldn't imagine having to do that, or what I went through, and having to like repeat that to the level that you seem to have. But yeah, I think also with New York, and the saying goes, if you make it in New York, you make it anywhere. And so I think there's also just this like mindset of me of like, oh well, now I'm an entrepreneur, but now I'm not in New York. Like that feels a bit ironic, I guess, but also doesn't mean that I made it. It is definitely like stuff that I need to journal about and yeah, process on my own. But yeah.
Add a journal to the Bonding Over Books SKUs, you guys.
Oh my
So
gosh,
we
yes.
can.
Doing that. There's lots of hopes and dreams for all the different products that we can come out that still aligns to our mission. So journaling is a big one.
Absolutely. And so now you're back in Michigan. You're blossoming slowly but surely. Tell us the story of your light bulb moment for Bonding Over Books.
Yeah, definitely. This is my favorite one to tell. So, like I said, I moved back, was struggling to find community. I saw a childhood friend that I hadn't talked to in probably over 10, 15 years. Like, we followed each other on social media, but didn't stay in touch really. And she posted that she was at book club in a neighboring city. And I decided to reach out to her, see if I could join the book club. And she was so sweet to respond right away, immediately. Let me add you to the group chat. It's a bunch of my girlfriends. It's pretty casual. And I had never been in a book club. I don't think I was even seeking out a book club. I was more so just seeking out opportunity to connect with people and to grow my community and meet new faces. And so I remember the first book book club was actually very close to where I lived, which was very convenient. And so I was like, okay, if this doesn't go well, I can just like sneak out and I can go home. But I went and it was, I don't know, like 10, 15 women and all faces that I didn't know besides the one. And again, I hadn't seen her in so many years. So there was this like, awkwardness of like, how are you? How do we catch up over, you can't just say like, what's new? It's very hard to answer that question when you haven't seen somebody in so long. It's like so much is new. Like I'm a totally different person than when you knew me. But everyone was so sweet and so welcoming. And it really just like changed everything for me. And as much as I loved it, I will say that I was also like a little frustrated as we had more and more meetings together that it was hard to keep everybody centered on the book. And so I was like, there must be a way where we can still gab, we can still chat, we can still get to know each other, but keep it centered on the book. There has to be a way that we can balance those two a little bit more, because I think that when it comes to book club, a lot of people are seeking it for the same reasons I am and not necessarily to have a repeat of English class. I think there's times and places for literary analysis. I think there's so many groups out there that do that. But I think when it comes to your monthly book club and your community, doesn't really, I don't think that people are trying to repeat that format. And so when it was my turn to host, I ended up writing questions on pieces of paper, put them in a bowl, and was like, okay, everybody, we're going to sit in a circle, put your phones down, we're going to pass this around. And so that way it was alleviating the fact that it's hard when there's a moderator, I think, because then they're the ones that have to figure out all the questions to ask. And then I also think that, just as humans, when we talk, there's connotation to our voice, and hearing like how they are even asking the question kind of already gives you what their own feelings about how to answer it. So I think it makes puts everybody on the spot of, do I go against the grain? Do I not? And then typically what I was seeing is that there were a lot of people that were dominating that conversation and not everybody had a chance to speak. So I was like, okay, this will give everybody a chance to speak. They can ask their own question. And so the light bulb moment after all of this is there was a newer woman to book club and she pulled a question that continues to be my favorite to this day. And it's, at what age do you think reading this book would have benefited you the most? And we were reading The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, which is definitely a more mental health focused book. And so her answer made sense, but she answered it saying that she wished she read the book when she was younger because she went through periods of sadness and was possibly depressed and just didn't know it. And for me, that was the light bulb moment, because I was like, oh my God, this girl just shared something so vulnerable and so personal with new people. She probably wouldn't have done that, one, unless she was prompted, but two, I think there's a psychology component of you feel like you're talking about the book more so than you're talking about yourself. And so you're just more likely to open up and share. And I was like, this is exactly what I think the world needs right now, is to just have that tool to get you to open up and share. And the book being the common ground. So that, what I'm answering is going to be something that somebody else has read, so it doesn't feel as like, oh, I'm just sharing the story that you have no idea about. You have context and you know that they've also read what you've read, so it gives you that ability to share more about your opinions and not have it feel so random. So yeah, that was my light bulb moment.
That is so cool. In college, I used to play fishbowl a ton, which is that like charades
Yes.
game. And when we first chatted before the podcast and you shared that story, I felt a lot like fishbowl. And it seemingly is the same concept because fishbowl is also like an icebreaker game. But in your sense, having that book as the common space and that being the icebreaker, and then these prompts in a bowl that everybody can participate in, brings a sense of play, but also connection and communication, like all in one space, all in one product. So I am so excited to dig into how you actually make your prompts and how you actually made your product and all of the like nitty gritty of creating your dream product. But before that, I want to hear a little bit more about your journey. So you've had your light bulb moment and you had this long-standing career in lifecycle marketing and with startups. When did you know it was time to go all in on your business? And what were some ways that you have supported yourself along this journey?
Yeah, definitely. So I was thinking about this question ahead of our time together, and how I define all in is a little different than I think how other founders might define all in. And what I mean by that is that I think there's a trend right now where people are sharing their founder journeys, and it's so beautiful. And you have these amazing, amazing founder led brands that truly I look up to, and I'm like, you guys are crushing it. But a lot of those series leads with, I quit my job to start X, Y, and Z, and then it seems like, oh, that's what you have to do in order to start this founder journey and be an entrepreneur. You have to quit everything, and then you go all in from the beginning. Um, and I had a very different path. Of course, as we mentioned, like I had this long standing career in marketing, worked for numerous startups. And when I started this entrepreneur journey, I continued to have that full time career. So I was working on Bonding Over Books at night, in the early morning, on lunch breaks, like anytime I could fit it in. And it wasn't something that I felt I could financially or even just, yeah, I didn't think it was the time for me when the idea first landed that I could just like drop everything and go all in. And maybe that's because I'm a bit more modest with my approach to those things. But how I define all in now is that I took the bet on myself to quit full time. I didn't necessarily go all in where I'm no longer working and only focused on Bonding Over Books. And what that means is that I'm no longer a full time employee. I contract. So I'm currently contracting for another startup, of course, actually in the fintech space. And I also support some other female founded brands with their marketing and content strategy on the side, and those opportunities kind of just fall as they may. But all in to me means that I am going all in on myself and having more control over how I spend my time. So being able to contract alongside some freelancing opportunities and building Bonding Over Books to me was my way of saying that, this is what it looks like to really take a bet on myself, because having that control of your schedule, I think is everything. So yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. And I'm glad that you have reframed what all in stands for yourself. I think, just like you said, on the internet and the trend right now is quitting your job to go all in. And then there is this huge question and somewhat this misinformation. There may be a better word for it, but this misinformation around how do you then create this business at the velocity that you are and support yourself. And we all know that prices are rising across the board, no matter where you live, truly. Doesn't have to be a big city. So it does leave the audience, the consumer who watches that content of, I'm not there yet. Like I can't quit my job. So my dreams of becoming an entrepreneur or a founder feels even farther away when it's really not. It's just redefining the words, just like you have for what it means for you. What are your goals? What's your mission? And what is the best route to get there? Sometimes it is staying full time. Sometimes it is getting your time freedom back and and freelancing and contracting. We have had both types of founders on the podcast. So I always love hearing those stories and how we are all out here doing it. So thank you so, 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 so much for reframing that for our audience. And what would be your tips for starting a service based freelancing business to fund your dream brand and your life?
Yeah. So honestly, for me, it kind of came to me, which was a really interesting experience. I think, for as soon as I started Bonding Over Books, I think the dream is always like, how can I do this full time? Like I love building, but building something of your own is an even more exhilarating experience. But I don't think I really even knew what I could offer or what that would look like. Within the past couple of months, I guess it's been maybe longer than that, I had somebody reach out to me asking, who is managing my social, who's designing my content. I was like, oh, it's me. And so I was like, I'm more than happy to chat with you and see if there's ways that I can support you. And I think just taking those conversations truthfully, I've always been a big networker, but you just never know where things can kind of what things can evolve into. And that was what that freelancing direction kind of was like for me. Again, I wasn't sitting at home being like, okay, I need to come up with a new offering. How am I going to design this? Do I need to come up with my website? I didn't think about that at all. This one really came naturally, or not even naturally. It truly fell in my lap, and I think it was maybe the universe being like, you can do this. Here it is. Take it and see where it goes. And so that was, how that kind of ended up taking shape. And of course, I'm sure you can also be like, I really want to build this side thing. Like, how do I do that? How it happened for me was just very different. So I want to be transparent about that I don't have all of the answers of how to build your freelancing portfolio and everything. It really was something that kind of came to me. But I will say what my advice would be, of course, taking those conversations. But recently, I think Hillary Duff gave a commencement speech. I forget where, but what I thought was so interesting is she was talking about how when opportunities come to you and you feel like you're so lucky to have this opportunity and grateful that of course you're going to say yes, and you say yes, 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 and yes. And that sometimes it's okay to say no or to reshape what that looks like. And I think for me, where I'm in contracting now was exactly that, of have those conversations of this might be a good opportunity, but how can I make it feel like it works for me and for you? And so just knowing, I guess, what you need in order to succeed. And, again, define all in. What does all in look like for you? And just have those conversations, I guess, is what I would say. And don't feel like just because there's an opportunity you have to say yes. You can go back and forth and figure out something that feels better for all parties involved, or say no and something else will come along.
And that makes a ton of sense. It really does. Especially if you're in that service based space and you are building something on the side to support your brand or whatever it is, you have to define how much time, again, you're going to want to put into this side business rather than your full time business, how long it's going to take, what your prices may need to be, how much you can take on for your capacity's sake, so that you don't lose the vision of why you started the side hustle in the beginning.
Yep,
Don't make the
exactly.
side hustle a full-time job and then you can't actually work on the dream business. That is super counterintuitive.
And it's hard. That's why I bring up like why that like commencement speech stood out to me so much, is because I think I'm probably a people pleasing person at the end of the day, that in recovery, but it's hard. It's really hard to say no, especially when the opportunity seems good and you're just getting started in those things. And as you know, like I'm very much just getting started and like no longer having a full-time job and figuring out again what this all in looks like for me. And so when opportunities come up, it just feels like you have to say yes. And sometimes you just don't have to say yes, but you also don't have to say no. And I think that's been the light bulb for me.
I love that. And since we're kind of going down the lane of funding, we love talking about funding on this podcast. How did you fund your initial product development run? That's such
Yes.
a fun story.
Yeah. So again, I'm based out of Metro Detroit, and there is an amazing organization based in Detroit called Boss Blue. They help female entrepreneurs and female in the workplace. Honestly, it's really just like a community for women to come together and for all things. But I think a big focus is women in the workplace. And so they have a fellowship program called 0 to 1. And I applied to that program, luckily was one of the few that was chosen for that cohort, and they provided us with $10,000 in initial funding toward whatever we were building. Of course, there was an interview process, there was forms that we had to fill out, it was like a big application. So I was very happy to have landed that, because I honestly don't know what I would have done to kind of fund it. I probably would have had to put like a little savings account together and continue to contribute to that. But this was really what was able to get me off the ground. And I would say as much as, of course, funding is as important, that community and network of women that I was surrounded by that was also building brands of all different kinds. And, some had a brick and mortar, some had a service-based offering, and then others also had physical products. And so we were all doing something a little different, but being able to build alongside other women and figure it out together. There's so much that you don't even think about truthfully. And then you're like, oh my God, I guess I need to do that too. And just learning from one another, I think was the biggest win. But of course, the funding very much helped us to get that first round of product and our branding and everything off the ground.
That's incredible. I'm in an accelerator program for my MBA, and I want to say almost every founder that has been on the Trenches podcast thus far has gone through some type of accelerator program. And that's just a fascinating data point that I am finding more and more as I interview founders, is that it sounds like people are doing it on their own and it looks like that from the outside. But the reality is everybody starts from the same position of, I have an idea and I have no idea how to build it. How do I find people who can help me do that? And a lot of us have landed ourselves in accelerator programs. And it is great to hear that yours actually had funding and, yes, the application and all of that, but that was a part of it. Like, that could be an ending result, and you were a wonderful, hardworking, not just lucky gal to get that funding at the end of it. And I wanted to get your take on, after your initial product run, doing pre-order sales. I've
Mm.
seen some founders take that route, whether they have funding or not, as a route to making a little bit of money for their first production run. So tell me what the pros and cons are, if you've done pre orders, and just what's your overall opinion?
Yeah, we did end up doing pre orders. And I think for us, it was more so the timeline of when we found the manufacturer, when we landed the actual design of everything, and competing that timeline with upcoming events that were happening. And so for me, it was like, in order for me to still have presence at those events, pre order was really the only route I could go because I didn't have my physical product ready yet. And so it was less of like, how do I get funding to then execute the order? It was like, this order is happening, it's coming, it's just not here yet. And so we had, again, at the end of this fellowship program, we had a wonderful marketplace. And so that was one of the opportunities that, again, I wanted presence, and I wanted people to be able to support us in that way and get excited about the product and see if they were excited about the product to take a gamble and pre-order it. And then also in Detroit, they do a book festival every year. And so that was another one that I was like, I think I need to have presence here. It's better for me to get the word out about my brand. Even if nobody pre-orders, I can at least get Bonding Over Books in front of them. But that was, again, my way of starting to build that momentum and be able to ship out orders as soon as the product landed to me, which was very fun and exciting. But yeah, it was less of a strategic thing about how do I make money off of this, and more of just where the calendars were kind of aligning.
That's actually great, because a lot of times you hear that pre orders are founders trying to get money to actually fund their real run, when you actually use pre orders for what pre orders should be to a degree. And just saying, hey, this product is legitimately coming, but I really wanted to have a presence at these events, conferences, pop ups, vendor markets, whatever it would be, to get the name out there. Although you don't have this table full of inventory, you're like, here's two or three that you can see. These are our samples. And if you place a pre order at the table today, then it'll be shipped out to you in the next, 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever your timeline was. And I think for a lot of founders who are bootstrapping their companies, that's a great way to use their samples that they have. That's a great way to test the market. Whether they need funding or not, it's all about getting out there and talking to customers and building that brand awareness from the very beginning. And if you have a few samples, you might as well set up a pre-order page with Shopify. Shopify, please sponsor the podcast, and get it done. So I love that. And I love that you have also gone physical, but you're in the game space, I would say. So, for founders out there looking to create a game like category product, what would be your top three things you wish you knew before starting a physical product?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It is so funny to think back on those early days of what the heck did I do? I think one of the main questions I get from people is, how did you find your manufacturer? What did that even look like? How did you vet them? And I spent a lot of hours and time just talking to different manufacturers that were primarily based in China, and so some late nights doing that. But yeah, I think the first three things is one, finding that manufacturing partner is huge. You want somebody that you can trust, that you can constantly be in contact with. If you need to rush something, if you have other opportunities come up, and having that relationship with them, I think was really critical. And so I would say that would be probably number one almost, of finding a partner that you can trust. And I've heard from multiple people that, they've changed their packaging or their manufacturing partner numerous times. I haven't yet. I really love mine. So we'll see as we continue to scale, hopefully, and also develop new product as well, how that will shift and evolve. But I'm very fortunate to have landed with them. Two, I will say that when you find a partner that might look shiny on the outside, isn't always going to be that result. So I will be very transparent that I was also a bit taken advantage of at one point when we were trying to develop product early on. And again, why the timeline shifted and everything for the pre-orders, where the product came back and the colors of everything were so off. The actual quality of the paper was not great, but I felt like it was just part of the experience. So yeah, that manufacturing partner again is very important to have, because you can't trust everyone. I would say two is the design, like finding somebody that knows product design, I think is also really important. Understanding like what it looks like within your category. There were moments that, any store that had big selection of games, I have a full album of that on my phone of how will my product look if it was on that. And I would just go on Canva, truthfully, and I would like, put it next to it to see, does it pop? Does it look right? Is it competing against with the colors? So yeah, working with somebody who understands product design, I think is also a critical piece, because you want your product to obviously pop when it's on the shelf. And then third, trying to think for having my physical product, what I would say is the third one. I think the manufacturing and design were honestly the biggest learning curve things for me. Managing inventory maybe is another thing. I currently only have one SKU, and that's been a bit more manageable. And now I live in a house, not an apartment in New York. I truly don't know how I would be doing this if I lived in an apartment. But yeah, I think probably making sure that you have a system down for how you're going to manage your inventory, where you're going to store it, and what that model also looks like. Some people do, the where other people are executing the orders for them. I'm still at a place where I am fully packaging and doing that all on my own. So having that place and understanding of how much product you need and all of that, I think is also important.
That's actually great. We have yet to have a founder on the podcast talk about managing inventory.
Mm.
And I don't think it will be boring to our listeners, because this is why they listen to the podcast. But honestly, for me, I think out of everything you said, we talked about manufacturers on this podcast, we have talked about good partnerships, but actually managing your inventory, that is probably the next part that I need to look into personally for myself. But also, we clearly need to have an entire podcast episode about that, because I have never really dug into what that aspect of a business is. It quite literally is, I would say 40% of it.
Yeah.
It's getting the product made, and then it's how do you actually get it into people's hands? That is also a
Yes,
significant part.
and that in between period, where is it? And so I think that for me, like again, like I have a house with a basement, and so the basement is my storage for all of our product and all of our event materials and everything else. And I know that there's so many, amazing brands out there that have a good social presence of them putting the packaging together, and they have this amazing, beautiful workshop of what that looks like. But I think that's something that you have to keep in mind. Again, what does that workspace look like for you? And if you're starting a company and again, you might not have the space to store it, where are you putting it? Or are you going to do a different model where it's, only produced once it's
Mhm.
ordered? Um,
Yeah. And that makes a ton of sense. And I want to dig into a little bit more of the uniqueness of your product and what makes it special and different and fun. Can you walk us through the process of creating a product like yours, from how you created the questions to actually getting the product into hands, so that future founders also know what it takes to make possibly a card game?
so for me, again, being a marketer by trade, I wanted to focus on the brand development. So that was probably step one for me, is building out what our brand is going to look like and how people are going to hopefully perceive it. And then two, of course, it was actually like, okay, how does this game work? So coming up with the actual questions that would be within the game itself, and then also what are the instructions, what does that look like, and so more of the tactical side of figuring that out. I think there are so many games out there, especially as I was doing all of my product research and collecting games from all different potential manufacturing partners, that are so intense that that's probably where they're starting, is that they're coming up with, all of the different pieces and all of the different rules. Ours is very straightforward. You pull a question, you answer it, you open it up to the group, you play really however you want to. So there's no wrong way to play, is what we say. But yeah, I think coming up with the questions was not necessarily like hard, but it did take a while, because I think for me it was really important to have questions that did go deep and allowed you to probably go to a place that you wouldn't otherwise in a conversation, but also emotions have the full spectrum. So also your lighthearted, more fun questions as well. So finding that balance was really important. And then third was moving into like actually testing it. So I got a user test group together. I pulled together a group of women that I met each of them independently after moving back to Michigan. And it was important to me that they all didn't know each other and they were newer faces to me too. So I wasn't going to have, some biased opinion or not maybe getting the most genuine of feedback if it was one of my good friends. And so that gave me the space to be like, okay, let's actually test this and see how it works. Are these questions landing? And we would read different books across different genres to also see, do the questions still work? So I think having that testing period is really important before you actually go into production. But a lot of those things were also still happening behind the scenes, of course. Like I was trying to figure out that manufacturing partner while I was also testing. So I think, as I could give you steps 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of them are happening at the same time. And so it's just management and prioritization of which one to do first. But those are probably the steps that I took.
That is so cool that you got an early user group or beta testing group or focus group or customer discovery group together to actually test and validate your questions against many, many types of books. Because that is a huge part of your product, is you want it to be deep questions, meaningful conversations, but also be universal to all books, which there's millions and millions and billions of books out there.
Yeah.
So creating a product like that, I could definitely see as hard, as harder. And it's great that you also found a group of women who were into books, but you made a choice to say, no, I want to have a connection to you, but also I don't want us to be too close, because I need this to be unbiased feedback. I need to run as close to a real experiment, scientific experiment, as I can. So I can't be too close to you. You can't be too close to me, because that's how you get the honest feedback. I'm learning the same thing in my MBA program. We're in customer discovery right now, and I am finding people from far, far, far and wide to do interviews with me. And they're definitely teaching us to be extremely, extremely neutral when we talk to people. And I actually was talking to one of my founder friends the other day, interviewing her, and we had this awkward pause. after I asked her a question because I think she wanted me to give her feedback or like have some type of reaction to what she said. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I know that we are having this pause because you want me to give feedback or like me to say something, but I'm like, I can't. It's against my program's rules. I have to be extremely neutral here. And so seeing how you have created this beta testing group is really interesting to me. I'm a part of some for some of my other founder friends as well. And to just see how people navigate building early community and validating your ideas and getting those key insights for how you're going to move forward is just so interesting to me on all of the different arrays of ways that people are doing that. And thank you so much for sharing that. For anybody who's out there who wants to create a game, there's the process, you guys. There it is. Then you just got to find manufacturers at the same time and do some pre-orders and get it out there.
There's a lot to do. Again, I get, we could say 1, 2, 3, 4, but I honestly think, you have to be doing 4 as you're doing 1, and then you'll go back to 2, and then maybe you'll jump up to 8. Like it's the founder journey is not a linear path. I think that's what we all know.
And that is very, very true. And another key part with your brand is mental health. We haven't talked about it yet, but I am super excited to learn more about the building of meaningful connections through bonding over books. And you have been very, very open about being a mental health advocate and reducing the loneliness epidemic that we all face. How are some ways that you brought that aspect and mission into your brand?
Now, I am fully a believer that book clubs are a solution to today's loneliness epidemic. And I think I experienced that firsthand. In terms of mental health being like a big part of our mission, I think it's more so the fact that our product and what we stand for and what we're really hoping to do is to get people to put down their phones, pick up a book, and then get together in real life to have meaningful conversations and deeper connections as a result. And I think what we take from a book is so dependent on what we have or haven't experienced in our own lives. And so just having this product to bring out that in ourselves and answer those questions and kind of go a little deeper than did you like that character? Did you not like that character? And more so, does that character remind you of someone important in your life? And so that's really what I'm trying to do in terms of mental health aspect of just understanding how much we can learn about ourselves and each other by way of talking about a book. And sometimes we just need the right questions and prompts in order to do that.
That makes a ton of sense. I'm a prompted journaler all the way. I don't think that I would journal as deeply as I did if I did not have the prompts. So I love that that is a part of your mission and it's all about connection. And you've shared 2 kind of instances where connection is a big part of your brand. One in the pre-orders and getting your product in people's hands, making connections with people that way. Your company overall is all about making connections interpersonally with people around you. Let's chat some events that you've showed up to and how your product is also building community now that it is out in the world and that it has its own voice and life of itself. So this year you attended BookCon, which is a new conference for the podcast. What is BookCon and how did you take advantage of that opportunity as a founder?
Yeah, definitely. I saw them post on social media about BookCon being back. So it was actually an experience or a weekend long event, very similar to Comic Con, but for the book world that took place pre-COVID and they hadn't done it since 2020. And so I had never been, I didn't really know what to expect from it, but I knew that it was going to be something that we should have a presence at. So I immediately reached out. I immediately filled out the application, and it was a 2-day event at Javits Center in New York City. And they have everything you could imagine. They have authors there doing book signings. They have panels. They have different bookstores. They have the publishing houses doing certain activations. And then there were so many vendors similar to me selling a lot of like bookish goods and merchandise. And so for us, it was, again, such a cool opportunity to be in front of so many readers and book clubbers. And also, of course, we've started to connect with other book influencers in the space on social. And then having the opportunity to like meet them face to face was such a special thing to do and actually show them our product and have the opportunity to just go a little bit deeper into what we stand for and how we got started was really special and important. So having again that visibility and being in the right place at the right time, I think is really crucial to building a brand presence and also building that community amongst the consumers that you hope to buy your product from.
That's incredible. I love that you went to BookCon. I had never heard of BookCon, which now it slightly makes sense since they were not here for a few years and they've just come back around. I'm excited to learn more about that conference and everybody who is there because that seems like an incredible, incredible opportunity. And your brand over the past 2 years since launching in 2024 now is sold in some major retailers across the country, Barnes& and Noble and paper stores. How did you get your product into retail, and what was that process like?
Yeah. So I'll start with our initial retail tactic. So we are available on Fair, which is a wholesale site. And so a lot of independent bookstores or some of your like more boutique knick-knack stores that also sell card games and stuff, very similar in nature to what we have, will purchase products via Fair. And
Mhm.
so that was something that we learned about pretty early on. And so after we had a photo shoot where we could really display our product well on that site, we made sure that we were very much present there. But even before Fair, I would go into bookstores and I would honestly pitch bonding over books to the bookseller there or whoever was their buyer. I would get their contact information. I would reach out to them. So it was a very much, my own way of trying to land on the shelves. And we were able to do that with a few bookstores that way. But I think again, having Fair was the thing that allowed us to be over 60 independent bookstores nationwide now. And then this past summer, I received an email actually from Barnes and Noble or a contact there, and I thought it was spam. Like I was like, there is no way that Barnes and Noble is reaching out to me about bonding over books. Like I couldn't believe it. And so I immediately looked up the name of who emailed me on LinkedIn to see if they like actually existed. Like I was like, I have to do a little more research myself before I get too excited. And yeah, I emailed back and we ended up having some back and forth about what we offer and what our pricing would be. We sent them some samples for them to also be able to see the physical product itself. And it took a couple of months to really kind of finalize all of that. They're obviously a very large retailer, and so they have a bit more process to go through than your smaller mom and pop type shops. So it definitely took, I think that was between August and November of just back and forth, checking in. Are we still good? Should we be expecting to PO soon? And again, they just operate on specific timelines, and especially bringing new product into the store, they have to go through a lot of different checklists. I think we got an operations guide from them that is definitely over 100 pages long. It is really wild, just all the things that you have to check off and how you're packaging your games and how you're delivering them to them. There's a lot of guidelines and a lot of things that you have to follow. So yeah, it honestly, as much as I was initially pitching ourselves, and I obviously am still doing that today, sometimes things find you, which is just as wonderful and beautiful.
That's amazing. And I was going to ask, when stocking a product like yours in retail, but you also mentioned that you're still packaging and shipping your orders from your lovely home. What changed about your supply chain? Are you packing the orders that go to Barnes& and Noble, or is there a different operation there?
Yeah, completely different operation. They order in quite mass quantities. And so we actually have like a pallet that gets delivered. Fortunately, we have quite a large like maintenance barn. And so that serves as my warehouse. So we're able to do deliveries there of these pallets of boxes. And then we have a forklift there as well. So once Barnes and Noble then will send their truck and we're able to put it on the truck for them to take away. So yeah, it's quite a process.
That is incredible. Shout out to the forklift. because that is incredible. I
Yeah.
love that. That is awesome. That's great that you had that resource, but also you guys were able to come together and think of, again, a scrappy yet creative way to use those resources in what may be a barn is also somebody's warehouse, potato, potato,
Yep.
and
Yep.
figure out how to really take on this amazing opportunity as you could and as you can. So that is amazing. And I
Yeah.
know you said that the operations, yes, are a little bit different in supplying your retailers versus individual D2C customers. Walk us through your tool stack on how do you keep yourself and bonding over books running on a day-to-day basis? This could be your web builder, your email marketing platform, how you keep yourself organized, and any organization tips for us busy founders out there.
Yeah, definitely. Run on a very slim MarTech, or I guess I should just say like all technology basis. I think, especially as a solopreneur, managing too much, it just wouldn't stay up to date. And I probably would forget about certain tools that I even have. So we currently are built on Squarespace, and Squarespace is also where I'm managing all of my orders and intake. And we are potentially shifting to Shopify, but still in the works of figuring that out. But that's really been where I got my start. And I thought it was very intuitive to build our site on there and get at least the e-commerce aspect up and running. And then beyond that, I use spreadsheets for my own management of what we're spending on, and also our inventory as well. Squarespace does track that, but there's of course instances where I'm sending out product to an influencer or somebody, and so I have to also have a way to mark that and manage that. Honestly, I think it's right now pretty much Squarespace and spreadsheets. It's not that crazy. Yeah,
I love that. Keeping it lean. Once you make things a little bit too complicated, it gets lost and you forget. And that can really stress you out as a founder when you have enough to be stressed out about. So
totally.
I like that approach. I love that approach. I think I need to decomplicate a lot of things in my life and in my business, or I need to get an AI agent. I don't know, but I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yes, I'm pretty much using AI in terms of, bouncing ideas off of right now. I haven't fully jumped into it to help actually be my full blown assistant and manager of my time and priorities, but I am so analog. I don't know if that says more about me, but I am a list taker writer. So, as much as I try to use like Asana or any of those project management tools, at least for my personal stuff, it doesn't work. I'm also a big Canva user. So, Canva is where I am designing everything. I manage our social media. And so I'm building out all of our posts on Canva. And then in terms of social media management, I'm just actually using the native tools themselves. So no scheduler or anything like that.
Dang, you go, girl. You're keeping up with all of it. That's amazing. Literally, that is amazing. And that's why I love talking to female founders because we are so ambitious and we can take on a lot. But as long as there's a mission, as long as it's all has a purpose, we're willing to take on the world, which I think is absolutely incredible. And now I want to get into our little advice column, a little bit more into the mission driven part of your brand, because so many female founders are creating mission driven brands. And as you shared in this podcast, mental health is a huge part of that for you. So, can you share with us your personal ties to mental health advocacy?
Yeah, definitely. So, unfortunately, since 2011, I have lost 5 friends to suicide. And that has always been at the forefront of my mind with literally everything I do of how to prevent that from happening. And unfortunately, with COVID and the downstream impacts of that and social media today and just technology in general and our digital devices, I think we are more lonely than we have ever been. And that is so hard for me, and I experienced it firsthand too, and it's awful. We really need that community and connection piece, and I just find it to be so important to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that people aren't falling into that state, and also just to break that stigma. I think mental illness is real, and it's like any other illness that you could experience. It's just looks a little different. And how do we make sure that we are okay talking about it and being there for people that are struggling? So yeah, it's something that really hits home for me, and I miss my friends dearly, and if I can do anything to make them proud and work in their honor, that is the greatest thing that I think I could do.
That is so beautiful. And I know that cultivating deeper conversations is at the heart of both yourself and your brand. What would be your advice to anyone listening who is craving meaningful connections and conversations?
So of course I'm going to say join a book club. Or start a book club. I think you'll be very surprised by how much it can change your life. Reading is better for us. Being in person is better for us, or having those connections in person, I should say. And so if you're looking for something like that, finding a community. And if reading's not your thing, find people that are doing at least another hobby of sorts that you can bond with them over that and that shared love. But I think being able to connect with people over something that is a shared interest is always a great way to building that community and having those more meaningful conversations.
That's also beautiful. I'm a wellness girly, probably a little bit more than I am a reading girly, but I've loved the rise of clubs, and I am fascinated by all different types of clubs, whether I'm into it or not. So I love hearing from people who are in book clubs. I love hearing about people who are in knitting clubs and crafting clubs and picnic clubs and baking clubs. And yes, run clubs. I don't know if I'll ever make it to one, but Pilates clubs, let's make one. All the types of clubs that are coming out there. And I've even done a ton of research on mail clubs, snail mail clubs,
Oh,
which
yes,
I
yes, yes.
also think are super cool. So there's tons of ways out there, everyone, to connect with people, get off your phone, even if it is a mail club. It's still a physical thing that you are reading and you're seeing art in whatever the mail club may be. There's a ton of ways to connect with people. There's a ton of ways to get in person. And I do love the shift that I think we're all in right now is going back in person and finding new ways to play and meet people. And some of them are a little bit deeper in having conversations. So everybody get outside your house, push yourself a little bit, and you will not regret it. I promise. So, Sarah, I've been waiting to ask you this question, and you may or may not be prepared, but can you share with us your three favorite bonding over books prompts and
Oh
why
my
they
God.
are your favorites?
Yes, definitely. So my first one is going to be the one that was the light bulb moment. So that one still is obviously very much in the deck. And it is just to repeat, at what age do you think reading this book would have benefited you the most? And actually on the card itself, we now say now counts too. So if, you know, the book found you at the right time, that works as well. The second one would be, if you were going to get a tattoo based on the book, what would it be? I always seem to go to that one anytime I try to tell or share with people examples of the more like lighthearted, fun type questions. And I actually think, shout out to my fiance, I think he came up with that one. So maybe that's my subtle nod to him as well. And then my third one would have to be one that hits, of course, a bit more deeper. And that is there a character that reminds you of someone you've lost? And I want to give like a little story for that one, because I think as much as it can be like sad, it also can be so beautiful to honor somebody and share or talk about somebody that you've lost. Because when I was showing a friend our game very early on, and we were just chatting about it, we weren't reading the same book or anything, but he was like, let me just pull a card and answer one. And that was the card he pulled. And he lit up. Like, it wasn't sad. It was like he was so excited to share with me that he was reading some book about some like detective, and how this detective reminded him so much of his grandfather, and that his grandfather was a very curious minded person and he collected these things. And he just went on and on and on. And like, I was like, we would have never talked about his grandpa. Like that was not something I think he probably would have ever shared with me unless he was prompted. But it was just also one of those things that for me, it was like, well, you don't have to really be reading the same book either. You can just get to know each other better by what you're individually reading and still using the questions as a way to connect. But for me, again, when I say that question, people are that's heavy. And it doesn't have to be heavy. And that was my experience of it not being heavy. It was actually a very beautiful way of speaking about those we've lost and sharing about them in a way that we probably wouldn't otherwise.
I love that. And I love that you shared that story as well, because it does sound like a heavy question when people get the opportunity and are invited to uplift somebody who isn't here anymore. Yeah, it's a bittersweet moment. But also there's a lot of joy in it, especially when you are given the opportunity in a I don't want to say fun way, but in a lighthearted manner. It takes that heaviness away for just a second, and you get to celebrate the life that somebody lived and how you still think about them to this day, which is such a beautiful, beautiful experience.
I was just going to say, I should have followed up with him and asked him, were you thinking about your grandpa while reading this? Or was it only the question that really made you have that profound realization? So I think just that element too of you don't know what the question's going to really bring up for you. And that's a part of the game that I think is so great.
It is a great part, and I am so excited to get Bonding Over Books and play it. So, for our last little section here, I would love to know, for all of our ambitious crew members out there, what has kept you going while in the trenches?
Yeah. It's going to maybe sound cliche, but truly the mission that we are talking about right now. Anytime sharing these stories, I think I just get more reinvigorated of how much this could hopefully help people bring book club to a place that they probably haven't experienced before. And again, getting people to put down these phones, pick up our books, get together in real life, have those conversations, and just make it easier to have those conversations that are going to be meaningful and help us build that connection and community that we're all craving. So that's what keeps me going. Don't mean to sound cliche, but it truly is the mission.
I love that. Day in and day out, you are living the mission. And I am so glad that you've been able to share your experience here, because I hope you go into the rest of your day reinvigorated to keep building. And while you're also building your brand for the rest of the day, the rest of the week, I want to zoom out. What's at the end of this? What's beyond the trenches for you?
I hope Bonding Over Books becomes that name within the book club community that really no book club can exist without us. That would be the ultimate goal and dream. But I think there's a lot more hopefully to come. Again, we just started with the game itself, but as we kind of nodded to in the beginning, hopefully there's other ways that we can bring more products to life that align to what we're trying to do. And yeah, I think there's a lot more growth for us that I probably again don't really know quite yet. I think my focus currently is still just building up our brand and getting the product into more hands, but hopefully there'll be a lot more that resonates with what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. And as we close out this episode, what is something you wish you could tell everyone listening to this podcast?
There's like two things that come to mind, and both I'm sure have been said, but I think they are two things that have helped me. One is when you have an idea, either write it down or do it right then, because usually those things can escape you or you think too much about it. And that kind of leans into don't be afraid to be cringe. As I mentioned, my trench right now is building up our social and getting our brand out there more. And I think it can be very daunting and it can feel like you are being truly cringy. But once you start, I think it just helps to alleviate that feeling and you can just continue to keep going. So those would be my things of like, do it in the moment or write it down and make a plan for when you're going to do it. And don't be afraid to post and put yourself out there if that's part of what is going to help you build your brand.
I love that. Thank you so much for that advice, Sarah, and for sharing your origin story here with us on Trenches. I can't wait to see what you continue to build beyond the trenches. For our crew members out there, please go follow Bonding Over Books on TikTok and Instagram. That's at bondingoverbooks.co on Instagram and at bondingoverbooks on TikTok. And check the show notes for the Bonding Over Books website, which is bondingoverbooks.co. Thank you again, Sarah, for joining me today on Trenches. I am so grateful you chose to spend some time with me and the crew. And to the crew, we will see you next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget to follow us on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Your likes, comments, and ratings make such a big difference in improving the show for each and every crew member. Also, if you're not already, come and join us on TikTok and Instagram at Trenches the Podcast, where we don't just share clips, we're creating a network of co-builders in the comments. Each post is designed to be a truly impactful addition to your scroll that will actually help you improve your journey in many different ways. Now, since you're already a part of the crew, this is how you step inside. By allocating to the fund on Patreon, you become a stakeholder in Trenches the Podcast and officially join our cap table. With access to private content, early drops, resources, and chats reserved for people truly in the work. Here is where you get the tools and the behind the scenes of what it really takes to get beyond the trenches. Your seat gives you direct access to contribute and make long-term decisions for our crew while finding community with fellow builders. It's time to take your seat at the table. Our mission is simple: make entrepreneurship less lonely. I'll see you in the next episode.